Today I'd like to talk to you about playing the bishop to f4 line against the Tarrasch defence, just as an alternative to what we've heard before. And I'll talk about the reasons I wanted to make the video as well. It's important, I think, not just to pick opening lines that are promising, but ones that sort of fit together. So, for example, when I used to play e4, I used to play a variation against a Sicilian defence. I used to play the Grand Prix attack, which looked like this sort of setup. And then against the Perk defence, I used to play with the King's Bishop on g2, which is a very different sort of, I mean, it's quite a nice line, but it's just a very different structure. And then when I played against Alekin's defence, I used to like to have the pawns in this sort of situation, with the bishop on d3 instead of c4, and two advanced pawns there. What else is there? Against the French defence, I'd play with an advanced pawn, but against the Caro-Kann, I used to play a system with with knights balanced, but with an exchange in the centre, and against a solid black pawn, sort of heading for an isolated queen pawn. Now, each one of those systems, I think, makes sense, but what they don't do is make sense together. What I should be trying to do, if I'm going to play an isolated queen pawn position, I should try and play an isolated queen pawn position against everything, just to help myself out a little bit. And if I was going to play positions with an advanced pawn, I'd try and play with an advanced pawn against everything. And again, that sort of has a sort of style thing in common. So, having said all that, we'll have a look at playing bishop f4 against the Tarrasch defence. So we're going to play d4, d5, c4, knight c3, c5 takes on d5, that's c5 takes on d5, takes on d5. You need to watch out for c takes d4 again. And now knight f3, knight c6. The line that Keane recommends begins with g3, but we don't seem to play g3 against anything else. So perhaps we can have a look at bishop f to f4 and playing e3, which at least perhaps gives us some chance to transpose into lines of the bishop f4 Blackburn Queen's Gambit. So I don't think this is a hugely strong line for white, but it does kind of fit, so it might suit you better. If you don't like this line too much, actually, there's quite a good alternative, I think, in bishop to g5, which swaps off the dark squared bishops, which is something you want to do against this isolated queen's pawn that may arise. And if you're not sure that the isolated queen pawn is going to happen, for example, after a move like e3, black might play c4, then take on c5, and I think white wins a fair number of these games, although I think the position is about equal. Anyhow, looking at the bishop to f4 line, play might well continue, sorry, the bishop f4 line, knight to f6 by black, and now e3. And I think at this point black's fairly well advised to grab some space on the queen side with c4. If they take on d4, one of the problems with this is if black just plays a developing move, then we're going to gain some time with d takes c5. So they usually move the c pawn one way or the other. But if they take on d4, knight takes d4, bishop to b4, and now one line is bishop to b5, castles, and rook to c1, with a standard sort of isolated queen pawn position, where black doesn't stand that well to try and attack us, or bishop to e2, which is a nice line I saw from a Spielman game, Jonathan Spielman. Knight e4, rook c1, and although white was being given an isolated pawn on c3 to match the one on d5, white came out of this quite nicely and won quite quickly. Queen to a5 was played, and now c4, breaking open the centre and just saying, well, my pieces are a bit better developed than yours are. And so that I don't know if this position is that much advantageous to white, but it was a fair way of playing, and that seems to have put black players off long enough for them to play after e3 c4. Various choices here now for white. I've seen a3 played just to stop black's next idea, which is bishop to e2, and now bishop to b4, having another go at our knight. We can just castle. And now, well, a variety of possibilities for black here. I've got a game on the file, bishop f5, bishop g5, which doesn't seem that consistent. And after castles, instead, then there's quite a lot of analysis from Glenn Fleer in a book called Dangerous Weapons, which is an exciting title. That white should play here knight to e5, and ends up with a little bit of a pull in most of the variations. I think probably the best line here for black is not to castle here, but take the immediate chance after castling to take the knight, and after recapturing, knight to e4, just to be a little bit annoying. Fleer gives queen to c2 here with a little bit of an edge, but I think the analysis that I've seen from Katronias is that after bishop to f5, queen to b2, queen to b6. Now white doesn't necessarily want to swap those queens with this with the c pawn hanging here. So white plays queen to a3, and black's gaining quite some time harassing our queen, and without us feeling very well developed. And so I think, although it's not kind to the rook after knight e4, the top analysis that I've seen most recently is rook to c1, and we'll make better use of our queen elsewhere. So in this position, well, there's again all sorts of possibilities here. G5 is one idea, and after bishop to g3, queen to a5, knight e5 again, and if black wants to chop on c3, we'll sacrifice the exchange and play bishop to h5. And white won in an email game in 2005 quite quickly after this, although I think the right sort of line is bishop to e6 and queen to f3. Black actually castles, and after swaps on f7, white's got quite a powerful attack against the king, having given up some material, but getting it back there. So that's one line for black g5. Instead of playing the g5 idea, so that's rook c1 g5 instead of g5, castling I think has got to be a little bit easier on both sides. And now knight to d2, challenging that strong knight, takes on d2, takes on d2, bishop to f5 I suppose is natural. And now we're going to try and play for e4 with f3. And now if bishop to g6, e4, a game by Stuart Conquest actually went to b5 here, and now rook fe1, rook e8, bishop to f1, h5, king h1. So white's being very careful, building up the position very slowly, and actually never got around to playing e4 in this position. but eventually got enough of a small advantage to run out the winner. Now I don't find this position hugely promising for white, but as I say, at least it gives us some sort of style consistency with the way that we play against the Queen's Gambit in general. So that's the idea.